Hi S3 and welcome back to your English work for the week. This week is a slightly different week because on Monday we would have had an in-service day and on Friday we would have had a holiday. So the work is slightly less than I have set in previous weeks. This week we're thinking about characterisation in a Cli Fi short story. So we have thought about what that genre means and we thought about a setting last week. This week we're thinking about the kinds of people who might live in these stories. Here's our week's overview. If you pause the slide and have a read through our learning intention and success criteria just now. What we are doing is we are learning to create realistic fictional characters, which might sound like a bit of a contradiction because we are making up this person, they're going to exist in our story, but they should be believable so that when somebody reads your story, the character that you're creating behaves, sounds and acts like a person that might exist in the real world. And the way that we do that is we make sure that the character that you are creating would fit into the worlds that you are describing, that they are a person with thoughts and feelings and a past that make them seem like they've actually lived a life, and that then they interact with people, other characters, in realistic ways. So the interactions and dialogues with them are believable, authentic, and reveal something about your own character. The first thing that we're going to do this week is to think about the kinds of characters that we encounter in climate fiction stories. And typically the main characters are people who are trying to adapt or survive in worlds which have changed dramatically because of climate change. I'm going to talk you through these 5 examples. 3 are novels and 2 are films, and talk to you about the main characters and what it is that they are trying to adapt to and how they do that. In the first example, Breathe, which is the novel that we looked at a little bit last week, the air has become unbreathable because the trees no longer exist in this world. And what we see on the front cover is those 3 characters who are mistrustful of the government and who have decided to venture outside of the breathable air pod to try and see what is happening. So the characters are adapting to a new way of being regulated, a new kind of government, and they are inquisitive and curious and trying to find out if what it is they have been told is actually true. In the second example, Oryx and Crake, which is a novel that I read last month, this novel is set in a more scientifically and technologically developed worlds that we currently live in. And in this world, scientists have developed new ways of producing food sources, lots of genetically modified animals. Now, there is a huge disaster in this novel, and the main character then has to survive in a world where there's really scary genetically modified animals out and hunting him. In the third example, The Day After Tomorrow, Sam, who's there in the tan jacket, and his friends are faced with decisions about how to stay safe and stay alive when they know that the weather is going to change dramatically within the next few days. So they are trying to survive in that world and to save as many people as they can, knowing that something is about to shift dramatically in terms of climate. In the fourth example, directly underneath, which is taken from the film 2012, Jackson Curtis, I think that's his name, is the main character who is trying to save his family when the world is collapsing. So his world has dramatically shifted, but the ground is cracking below his feet, the buildings are collapsing, and he is faced with the challenge of trying to save his family. In the final example, The Carbon Diaries, which we also looked at a little bit last week, the main character, Laura, is living in a world where energy sources have been capped and the weather is changing dramatically throughout this novel. So she is faced with flooding and more severe examples of weather change. The question you're going to be asking yourself this week is, how do people fit into the story that I am creating? When we think about the worlds that we were creating last week and the kinds of environments that people might be living in after a significant climate change or weather-related incident, how do these characters fit into stories? What is believable and how do they respond to these scenarios? Typically what we see is characters who are rising to the challenge and finding their own way in this new world. What we are going to do just now is watch a clip from the film The Day After Tomorrow. I have put that clip onto the WordPress site, so you're going to have to go back to the WordPress site and watch that clip now. As we're watching it, I want you to think about the character of Sam, who is trying to convince members of the public to stay in the library where he knows it's safe instead of going out into the cold. I want you to think about how his character is portrayed, what words we would use to describe him, and how it is he interacts with other characters that tells us something about who Sam is. So go to the WordPress site just now and watch that trailer and then come back to this video. Now that we've watched that clip and you've had a chance to think about those questions, I'm going to share what it is that I see about Sam when I watch that clip. So in terms of what we learn about him when he makes that speech and the interactions he has with the other characters, I think I would describe him as brave, knowledgeable, desperate, certain, and responsible. I see him as brave because we see him standing up to somebody that is older than him and who's also in a position of authority because he's trying to do what he thinks is right. The guy asks him, well, how do you know all of this? Where are you getting your information? And in that dialogue, Sam's able to say, my dad's a climatologist. And that gives what he's saying some authority. So he seems like he has the right science on his side. He's also desperate. You can see how strongly he is trying to save these people. You can hear it in his voice and the fact that he's raising his voice and in his facial expression. So the desperate ways that he kind of goes after them and tries to convince them shows us how much this means to him. He's very certain, even though everybody else is going with this other guy, he stands his ground and he stays behind as one of the only few that stays behind. So a certain, like, he has conviction in his decisions. And then finally, that he feels some sense of responsibility, or that he's trying to behave in a responsible way because he knows what's right for him and he knows that his friends are already on his side, but he still does his best to do what it is that is right for the other people. When you're creating your character this week, that's what I want us to be thinking about. How do they behave with other people? What decisions do they make about other people's well-being, and how much do they what actions do they take to try and save other people? Because that's something that we see over and over again in climate fiction stories. We're going to look at another way that characters are created and how we learn more about them through the way that they are portrayed in texts. This is a short extract from the novel Breathe, which we looked at a little bit last week. What I would like you to do is to pause the slide just now and to read the short extract that I've given you, thinking about the questions in the orange box. What do we learn about the character of Alina, whose perspective this extract is told from? What kinds of person is she, and what words would you use to describe her personality? Now that you've had a read of that extract and thought about those questions, I'm going to share with you the answers that I came up with. You might have different answers, and that's absolutely fine. We won't have all come up with exactly the same response to a text, but this is what I was thinking as I thought about those questions. So I've answered the first two questions together. What I noticed was that she was determined and committed to her mission. There were definite points in that extract where she could have got distracted or she could have given up, but actually she is determined to see it through and do what she has committed to. She notices the beauty of the natural world around her, and we get that through her first person narrative when she's talking about the view outside and how she wishes she was there. And that she's prepared to make the sacrifices for her cause, because she talks about how she quite fancies, I think, the guy that she's on a mission with, but she knows that she can't do anything about it because that's not the way that the organisation run, and she's prepared to make that sacrifice. What words would you use to describe her personality? What I came up with was that she was focused, she was brave, and that she's determined. That's something that we saw in the clip with Sam as well, and something that we see often in characters in Cli Fi stories. What you'll notice is that we didn't get a paragraph in that extract that just told us all about Alina's personality, because that's not normally how characters are developed in stories. Whilst at primary school you might have had paragraphs where you were describing a character's appearance and what they were like, and that was everything to do with your character. As you become better, more sophisticated writers, you're much more likely to drop little clues and hints in your writing that kind of build a character gradually. So that paragraph I've got there in that box is a summary of Alina's character, but it was actually drip fed to us throughout that extract and developed throughout the novel. And that's what we hope that you would do in your short story, that because you've got a really good sense of who your character is, you can drop in little details as you're writing that help to build a fully developed character. Hopefully you have some idea of who the main character in your story might be. What I would like you to do just now is pause the slide and to read through those questions and see if you can start to think about who your character is, how have they been affected, what has happened in the character's past. If you have answers to all of these questions, it will help to cement your character as somebody real in your head that you can begin to write about. This week is a slight deviation on what has happened in the previous 2 weeks. What I'm going to ask you to do is to create a character profile for a character that would fit into a climate change story. And then I'm also going to ask you to complete one of the extension tasks that comes on the slide after. All of those tasks have been crafted to help you think about your character as a fully developed person, and it's really important that you engage with at least one of them because it will help you understand who it is that you're writing about. So this week I would like you to send me 2 bits of work. The first is the character profile, and I'll show you what that's supposed to look like, and then you have also to pick one of the following extension tasks. You need to send it to me by next Wednesday, which is the 13th, and my email address is on this slide. So these are the extension tasks that I'm asking you to choose from. Have a pause of the slide and read through the choices. All of them will help you consider your character more deeply. So there's not one of them that is more useful than the other. Pick the one that speaks to you and that you think you would like to do. And here is the example of a character profile for you. I would like you to use the same bolded subheadings that I have got there. So name, age, habitat, friends and foes, family, challenges, interactions, and 3 words. You don't have to write in full sentences, but you do have to address all of those subheadings so that you can think about all the different aspects of your character's lives. So the name of your character, their age, habitat is where they live, friends or foes are the people that they have on their side or against them. Who do they have in their family or what has happened to their family? Challenges that they might face. Interactions is a subheading that is going to let you think about who are the other people in this story that my character might interact, speak with, and what might those interactions look like. And then finally, what 3 words would help to sum up your character. Last week I created a model setting of the city that was flooded and all of the inhabitants were moving via boats on what used to be streets, and there were bridges between these buildings. I have developed that idea and now I've created a character to live within that story. So have a read of my example and use the same subheadings to organise your character profile. That's us for the week, so please send me those 2 bits of work. Let me know how you're doing, if you're reading any Cli Fi, if you've watched any of the films. I hope everybody is doing well and are keeping safe. If you were involved in the video made for staff where you were singing along to Don't Worry About a Thing, thank you so much. That was such a delight to see this week. It made everybody smile a lot. Stay safe, guys.